Hello and welcome back to the Argyle DataX Unite Data Science Summit. My name is Michael with Argyle. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. And now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Beverly Wright, PhD, Academic Program Director, Data Science with the University of Georgia. We're excited to have Beverly and our panelists with us for a panel discussion titled Strengthening Your Maturing Data Science Practice. Beverly, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome, and over to you.
Thanks, Michael. My pleasure. And hello, everyone. Welcome to Strengthening Your Maturing Data Science Practice. Super excited for what is my first presentation of the calendar year, and probably many of our panelists, the same holds true. So we're going to have a fun session, and we're going to start with some really interesting questions and sort of dive into the content about how to go about strengthening your data science practice and capabilities. But first, quick introductions. My experience spans over 30 years. I was lucky enough to find this work in 1991. I spent over 2 decades in the academic industry, continue to do so at University of Georgia. Go Dogs. Yes, we are the national championship winners. And I'm the director of data science for executive education at UGA. Before that, I worked in industry. I've worked as a consultant, and I serve on several boards, including Informs and Technology Association of Georgia, where I run a podcast called Tag Data Talk. Dennis, can you please give us your introduction?
Sure. I'm Dr. Dennis Jones. I'm professor of computer information systems at Tarleton State University, which is a regional campus of the Texas A&M University system. Not quite as good as University of Georgia this year, but we're trying. I teach primarily in our Master Information Systems program, which is an online program for primarily people who are working in the field and want to come back and get current on what's going on. And I teach a lot of data-related courses in that program. And I've been doing it for a long time. I've been here 31 years at the university. And I've done a lot of data-related projects for the university, just got involved in helping them develop their data strategy and projects like that. And I'm looking forward to meeting everybody and talking with everybody.
Perfect. Thank you. Vamsi.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Beverly, for the introduction. I'm Vamsi Nadimpalli. I'm the Senior Director of Data Science at Extra Space Storage. We are a team of advanced analytics professionals focusing on problems around pricing and revenue management, marketing analytics, and other digital analytics initiatives. I have about 13 years of experience in advanced analytics space. A lot of that is focused on pricing and revenue management. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here and share my thoughts on this topic. And yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And Prasoon.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. I'm Prasoon. I am VP of Data Platform and a business at Tawant. And I have been in data analytics field for 10 years, an engineer for more than 20 years. And in my role, I build teams, make sure that they are successful, and these are data science and analytics teams for various mission critical global projects. And happy to be here to share my thoughts today. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And as we're talking today about maturing strengthening your maturing data science practice, a lot of this centers around the human component. Now, there are, of course, other pieces to this, system, processes, and technology. So as we're talking about how to mature your data science practices, we'll focus primarily on the people aspect, but recognizing that there are, of course, other dimensions to this, including the processes, the technology, platforms, and things of that nature. So when we talk about a data scientist, many times people have different definitions about what that even means. So let's start off real quick with what is a data scientist? If you were talking to the general public and you had to explain, like, what what does it mean to be a data scientist?
Beverly, I will go first.
Yeah, go ahead. Just go ahead.
Yeah. So when we talk to people about data science, and the general understanding is that data is an asset, right? And so then here comes the data scientist who has the wisdom, understanding, and technical skills to get next level of outputs from the data, do some kind of scientific work around it, apply logic, apply thought process and overall understanding of business goals, and helps the organization to move to the next level, grow the business.
Okay. Okay. Someone that can apply different techniques and leverage technology to get some sort of insights from data to support decision making, if I'm summarizing you approximately. Okay. And then Vamsi, you were going to say something, I think.
Just to add on to that, yeah, in my mind, data scientist is someone who can like harness the data that is available in any organization and provide critical insights that are ultimately moving the needle for the organization.
Okay, so it's about helping with something of value, you know, that this person is creating some kind of information, not just data, but information from the data that can help move the needle and advance an organization. Okay, these are great definitions. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Dennis?
Well, no, I just think the key is it's easy to go and do stuff, but it has to be something actionable. If not something you can actually help the business meet their needs. And again, that's why I understand the business need and make sure you're doing things that meet the needs of the organization, that they can actually do something with the information.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so if it's not action-based, so I'm going to get back to that in just a second. If it's not action-based, it might not be considered a data scientist. So it needs to be really something that you can do something with. So what about a research or an innovation team that's not immediately addressing a research? You know, they're looking at, well, what about in the future when this happens? It's answering questions that aren't even being asked yet. Would they still loosely be considered a data scientist, even if they're not answering a specific business question of the day?
I think so. I mean, again, like everything, tomato. But in order for data science programs to be successful, they got to go and show value. And that's what my co-presenters talked about. And if they can show a product manager how they're adding value to the organization, I think it's essential.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And we're gonna with that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So yes, that's why it's important to look at the ROIs of such initiatives. Right. Try to. I mean, it's not possible from first day, but we should have a structured approach toward that. And typically, either you earn more money or save some money or add or offer more features, right? So those should be some of the base criteria to define the ROI and align with business or organization goal. So that's where you don't get into kind of this situation for long. What you just
okay. Some interesting things that I've heard from our panelists here are, one is that when we think about data scientists, notice that at large, the panelists are saying it's not just the technical piece, it's the full cycle. Like, you've got to frame a problem, you've got to understand how to potentially extract some value, you've got to understand how to get it into the system, it's got to be relevant, it has to have ROI. So part one is that it's not just the technical side. And kind of part two that was especially interesting is that there's some kind of return for it. You know, in the for-profit space, it really all comes down to profit, which is by definition, revenue and expense. You're either lowering your expenses or increasing your revenue. Even if you're trying to improve customers, you're still doing that for those two purposes. Whereas in a nonprofit space, there's some other kind of KPI, saving lives or, you know, reducing homelessness or whatever. But it should, that second piece being that it should have some kind of impact on your KPIs, whether that's revenue, expense, or, you know, saving lives. So with those kind of definitions and that persona, if you will, in mind for what is a data scientist, I love this next question that we have for you guys. I think it's really relevant for a lot of hiring managers and senior leaders right now. And our next question is, how can non-data scientists, someone that is not a practicing data scientist, especially at the sort of director plus level, but how can a non-data scientist tell when someone who claims to be a data scientist really isn't? How can they identify someone that, because right now we're a sexy profession. Data scientists are still relatively sexy. Some people may claim to be a data scientist, whereas they're really not. What are the signals? How does that manifest itself? How can you tell?
So let me start. Sorry for my voice. So even though this whole like the space of data science is growing and the need for data scientists is growing, with that, a lot of different programs come into existence, a lot of boot camps. I still think that roughly like 70 or maybe even more than that of the data scientists today have some formal education in relevant fields. It could be math, computer science, or statistics, so any quantitative related field. Now that doesn't mean that anyone without that degree cannot become a data scientist, but I think going through a rigorous program in a quantitative field it definitely helps a lot. And if you don't have that, and probably you need to put the candidate through more scrutiny. In addition to that, you should be able to explain what you did or explain your projects clearly. So that isolates people that are coming up with superficial knowledge and not actually worked hands-on on different projects.
Great, love it. So number one is there are lots of degree programs out there. And to be crystal clear on what Vamsi is saying, that he's not saying that it's impossible to be a data scientist without having an analytics or data science degree. He's also not saying that that guarantees that this person really knows what they're doing, but you have a higher chance of knowing that this person they really know their stuff and their chops if they have a degree in it. Is that what you're saying, Vamsi?
That's correct.
Okay, and then the second part, which I really love, is the person should have the ability to really in-depth explain the data science work that has been done, and not just gimmicky terms or trying to fill in space and try to say that they did this and did that, and you can tell they didn't actually do it, or they don't know what they're referencing. So those are two really good indicators for not being a real data scientist. Any other indicators you guys would say, like how help the non-data scientists identify these sorts of things? Dennis?
Yeah, well, I guess one thing I want to mention about the degree, teaching at a university, obviously I think everybody should get the master's degree and come get one with us. But more importantly, I think a degree helps a person not just that technical training, but looks at the bigger picture, understand the theory behind it, so they can understand what works rather than just cookbooking. Oh, this is what we do in this situation, understanding the big picture. And I think the other thing, I was looking at this question more from the in result, somebody doing a presentation, when they get overly technical in their presentation, just like we talked to our system analyst students, you got to put the language in a way that the user understands. When you start using a lot of terminology the user doesn't understand, it can turn them off and they don't believe you.
Right. Okay. So they can act. So a few points I heard from you. They are able, a real data scientist is probably better equipped to translate the into terms that other people can understand. They also are better to understand the bigger picture And you talked about the inner workings, like this, a real data scientist would understand the inner workings, what's in the black box, even if they can't manually calculate it, but at least understand it to an extent and conceptually. They would also have, they would also hold some value towards the theory that's behind how the algorithms are working. These are great indicators. Anything else that the panel wanted to add? We have 6 really good indicators of how to kind of spot when someone claims to be a data scientist and they're really not. Anything else you want to add? Anybody? No? Cool. Well, what would you guys say are some of the top kinds of skills that data scientists really need? And there was a question in the chat about how the heck do you get them, especially if you're coming from a different field, you know, and you're trying to improve your data literacy. So what would you consider some of the core skills? Let's start with that.
Yeah, so I will go first. When we look at a data scientist or a person who want to be a data scientist, if they come from different field, right? So they need to have technical strength in place. For example, if you ask me, then knowing Python at the kind of moderate level, at least to start with, is a necessary skill. So you need to learn Python. There are data scientists who come from our background that also work well, but Python is the language of modern world, right? For data science. So you need to educate yourself in Python. You need to educate yourself on the mathematical concepts of traditional, I say traditional data science or machine learning. And then you should look at the advanced concepts of machine learning, which we call deep learning. And in that also there are different segues, right? Image processing, NLP, right? Or data processing in huge quantity, because there is a reason why deep learning exists for even to process tabular data in the real world, right? Then event processing. So what I mean to say is that there is a stepwise approach to at least get those minimal requirements in place so that you understand the space, educate yourself with what's changing, right? Because things change overnight, right? So GPT-3, and now we are all talking about ChatGPT, which is entirely, I will not say entirely different, but it is more than a transformer model, right? So it's a kind of combination model. So those things will be necessary, and since you are coming from the other field, you should be more kind of on your toes, putting more effort to educate yourself. And I'm very sure that people they can participate in Kaggle competitions, right? So I did that for a long time, right? So that's also a good kind of, I can say, sandbox kind of place to educate yourself, learn from fellow participants who are open to share. So those are some of my suggestions.
Okay, very nice. A few things that I had put in the chat for us to keep up with are that some sort of programming skill. And the way I've heard it described by hiring managers is you need to have one programming skill that you know really well, and then a second one that you sort of know, you can at least read it. Right now, the skill du jour is Python. So that's your preference, but to have at least some kind of programming skill, especially Python. The second thing you mentioned is and a lot of people don't like hearing this, I think it's great, but to understand math concepts. Way back in the day when I was teaching undergrads in applied stats, I had to manually calculate standard deviation, which, woe is me, I had to manually calculate standard deviation. Why would I ever do that instead of just putting it in the calculator? Well, it's because people didn't understand what they were standardly deviating from until they did the math. They didn't understand why is it called standard deviation? I don't know, I just pushed this button. So, but understanding the math concepts, you're saying, Prasoon, is really a core skill. You can't just kind of know which buttons to push. You should really understand the math concepts. Third thing you mentioned is the whole melee, like you got to understand machine learning, got to understand AI, at least to a certain point. And I think the fourth point, you didn't say this exactly, but I feel like there was a sense of just being a constant learner. Like, that's a core skill, is that we're in a dynamic field. We haven't been around as long as, math and data science and analytics is evolving. So getting someone that has the core skill of being a constant learner is important. That's a really great set. Anything to add to that, Dennis and Vamsi?
Yeah, go ahead. Val.
Yeah, thank you. So the step-by-step approach that Prasoon mentioned makes total sense. But in terms of data literacy, there's a spectrum of it. Everyone doesn't need to know like machine learning or deep learning. But I think the most basic skill for anyone would be like knowing how to wrangle your data. Could be, you can do that with Python, or you could do that with SQL, even more basic. But yeah, just having that like data wrangling skill is very essential. Like that is the stepping stone that can lead to other things as you mature as a data science professional.
That's a great point. Data engineers right now are getting paid really well. And especially as we're starting to rely on AutoML and other types of systems that are more automated, we want to make sure that people understand the data side of it, that data is getting ready to go into some of these models. Dennis, you were going to say something. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I think the other thing are important. I talk to my students when they're going out working in the field is communication skills, oral and written communication. And in my classes, they do a lot of that. They do a lot of presentations, technical presentations. They may be able to do that. And also having a business understanding. Every business is different. Having a basic understanding how businesses work. A lot of our students that come out of computer science background don't understand how a business functions, and just getting the concept of that. And the last thing I really push my students for is understanding cloud data warehousing. As we move more stuff to the cloud, I'm lucky. I have a company called Actian. They have an Avalanche data warehouse. They actually allow my students to use that. And we work with their engineers to give my students some experience accessing that, learning how to ingest data into there and how to extract data out. I think that's essential.
Fantastic. So some of the other attributes of and core skills include the contextual understanding. And Dennis, I even go so far as to make my teams go on field trips. So we were doing a quick example. We're doing a analysis with opioid addiction not patients, but people that have opioid addiction. And we actually went on kind of a field trip and met these people during one of their meetings to better understand and give some flavor and really personality to the data. I used to, go on trips with my salespeople when I was at the utility company and see the industrial operations and watch the way that they were using natural gas. So understanding the contextual side of what's going on, oftentimes that's the business. Listening into a call center if you're working with call center data. Also data warehousing, knowing how data comes to be, where it is, how it's moving in the system. And I'm going to add one to y'all's already wonderful set. I'm going to add curiosity. That's one that I hear that a really great data scientist has a core skill of curiosity. I would rather have someone that's highly curious than someone that already knows do several things, because if you're highly curious, you're going to constantly be seeking to improve and how to make things work. So I love this list that we have here. Okay, so we're getting some really great questions in the chat. The one I said that we come back to, how can people get more mature in their data science? Like, what are ways that some good to improve their data literacy and their learnings? I'll throw out a couple, and I don't know if it's okay with the program administrator, so I'll just suggest that you check me out on LinkedIn. But one thing that you could do is you could compete in a data science competition. Kaggle has them, DataKind does nonprofit ones. I'm running one right now through Technology Association of Georgia called Master Baller Competition. So that's one way to learn quickly about data science, gain mentors, get a business example under your belt. But what are, aside from the obvious, like get a degree and that sort of thing, what are some other ways that someone can build data literacy for those that are kind of resistant?
One way that worked for us throughout my career is having people to support the data science teams dedicate some of their capacity towards this continuous learning. Usually the teams are made up of a spectrum of skills, and a cross-pollination of those skills is necessary. And because the field is also evolving on a daily basis, tools and techniques are changing. If there are volunteers to learn a topic and spread that knowledge to the rest of the team, and if the management is supportive of that idea, I think that'll take the teams a long way and keep them up to date on what's going on.
Excellent. What are some other suggestions to become more data literate?
Yes. So if you see, as Vamsi said, the field is evolving, and what we see as the teams are maturing, some of the clear-cut roles are coming out. Right, one role is data engineer. There is the ML engineer role, the data scientist role, an ML ops engineer role. Right. So and if the organization is really seeing their teams maturing, they should try to map people who are interested and have expertise to particular those sub skill sets or sub roles which are important. That's one thing. Second is obviously you can look for cloud certifications or learning AWS or GCP or Azure, right? And there are data engineering related data warehouse certifications. So what I felt is that to start with, because we are talking about someone who's building the skills here, going through a systematic approach and going through certain tests and trying it out in field, right, in this environment will help a lot. Because then it gives you the confidence that you are not missing out. For example, what is sharding, right? So those kind of basic concepts, until you understand, downstream as a data scientist, if you understand, you will be able to make better positive. So better to invest time, and it doesn't take much time. If you are really curious, focused, you can do a lot. Nowadays, a lot of such courses already.
Love it. And I should have mentioned certification as well. I have a CAP at the end of my name, which is stands for Certified Analytics Professional, which is a designation that is through Informs. So that's one way for sure. We've got boot camps, of course, competing in a hackathon. You could even run a data science summit internally. And I'll give you a quick story on that. When I was at Cox Communications, because I've been in data science so long, we had Cox Media Group, we had Cox Communications, Cox Enterprises, all these different companies in the Atlanta area. And I was hearing people from different divisions saying they're working on something that sounded exactly like something someone else was working on. And so I started connecting people. And at some point I said, I feel like I just need to get everybody in the same room at the same time, all the data science people. So we started the Cox Analytics Summit, and I think it's still running. And that was a long time ago. That's a good way to improve data literacy. And we actually started by inviting only data people, but as it turned out, there were many people that were involved in it. The person asking the question was talking about people that are resistant. That was a situation where people that were not normally involved in the data space were coming to learn, like, what is this thing all about? So sometimes running a summit can work as well.
Yeah, going with that, that's a brilliant idea. We also did brown bag sessions in our company.
Oh,
and
great.
Yeah, in one of the brown bag sessions, the task was for me to explain that how deep learning works in image processing, right? So what is computer vision? And in such sessions, you need to address all kind of audiences, because there is someone from finance team, there is someone from IT team, so they have different level of understanding and maturity. So that's where also I think that's a good idea, because then as a data scientist, you think that how do I communicate across the spectrum of audiences to make this understanding common? And then it brings some kind of focus inside the organization about what is latest, right? So that's one I
Mhm.
like.
Love it. NCR does something similar, and the people, the data scientists that are involved in it, seem to really get into it. So that's a great suggestion. Any others before we any other comments about
Yeah, one
how to
thing I was gonna
enhance?
mention,
Yeah,
I'm working with a group, because one thing we see with data science teams, there's so much turnover in staff. A lot of times you're
Mhm.
constantly remaking the wheel. I'm working with a group right now that we're setting up a knowledge management system for the team so they can capture the information. So as people leave, they do, that people are not starting from scratch. I think they have some context of the learning so they can take what they know
Mhm.
and apply it. And again, you can use something simple as Teams or something to do that. And that's one thing I'm encouraging a lot of people to look at doing, develop some kind of knowledge management system for their team to capture that information.
Love it. That's great. Brilliant. I don't think people are investing in that enough. So I love to see that. Let's go to some of the questions that we see in the chat. As we're talking about the enhancing the maturity of your data science capabilities, one question is, how do you even measure that? Like, what does it mean to even, be mature in data science? So what are some of the key measures of success with data science maturity? And by the way, quick caveat, or two quick caveats are: one, there are several models out there that you can look at from different sources. IIA has one, Gartner probably has another one. I mean, there are different, rubrics, if you will, that will assess your analytics maturity. And I had a second caveat, which I'll think of it as, and second is I have a quick hack. And my quick hack version is to say, where's your innovation? Where do you do your data science innovation? And if I get blank stares, I know that they must not be a very mature organization. They're not even doing any data science innovation. So that's my quick way to find out. But panel, tell me, how would you, forget the models for a second, but if it were just you trying to assess an organization's data science maturity, how would you do it?
One way is to see how complete your practice is. Are you able to take the data from its rawest format to a model in production or an insight that is actionable? So if you're able to take things from one end to the other end, that's a sign of maturity. That means you have a complete team. And over time, like how quickly are you able to do that? Is that getting better? So that's another sign that you're improving your capabilities over time.
Yeah, I would
That's
suggest.
fantastic.
Yeah, to add to that, I would suggest to kind of set the metrics around project success or project being completed on time, on schedule, meeting the goals, right? That could be one clear cut. Second is, as I spoke about ROI earlier, right? So, because it's important to link it to organizational ROI so that you can always translate these to the numbers. So if let us say CEO comes and say that, hey, we spent $2 million, what did this team produce, right? So either we produce hard cash or we produce the softer aspects, for example, improved user experience, right? Better recommendations. So I think we need to set those metrics and kind of try to start measuring them. That could be a good step towards to bring it out in transparently, right? Not to say, hey, we are doing innovation, but we won't tell you what is innovation. So I think that's kind of a good way to become more open, set OKRs or KPIs or targets and measure them frequently and report it. And I think there will be failures because data science is an evolving field, and many a time, in fact, the project goals itself doesn't go right, and it's okay. Means I think we need to iterate and fix it and set that culture of transparency in terms of those metrics. I think that could be a good way.
Love it. Okay, fantastic. So what we have so far, data science maturity can be assessed by completeness of the practice. Can you really produce end-to-end analytics? Like, can you actually start with the business problem and go all the way through to the value prop, where you're producing something that's going to impact the business? A second thing that was mentioned is how quickly. Does it take forever, or is it something that you've done enough that you're mature enough? It's a process, and you got it down pat. A third thing that was mentioned, these are not necessarily in order here, but is does your data science really possess ROI? Is it producing some kind of impact on the business? The fourth is the kind of common metrics with any product development, which is data science done on time, within budget, and met the goals. I had talked about the presence of innovation, and I would also like to add, are your senior leaders involved in data science? Because if they are, you're probably more mature. And your org structure, is there a CAO at the organization, or is manager the highest ranking data science person? So that's more of it's not a way to make you more mature necessarily, but it's more of a manifestation that shows that you are. Any other additions to assessing the data science maturity of an organization that we want to add before we move to our next question about the future?
Well, the only thing I would add is getting feedback from your internal customers. How confident are they in the information you're giving them? We've gone through something here at the university where we're getting information, we're not sure whether we believe it or not. So there has to be a level of confidence there of the information you're providing them, and assessing that continually, each project, or how comfortable they are with it. So they're making decisions based on it. Because if you spend all this time and not making decisions based on it, then it's not really helping anybody.
Yeah. Okay. Good. And the last question before I ask you guys for a final piece of advice, the last question, we only have about 5 minutes to spend on this one, is what do you see for the future? And by the way, for the person that asked that question, again, check me out on LinkedIn, Beverly Wright, PhD, CAP. I have a blog about my top 10 predictions for 2023, and I'm also doing a webinar about it, so feel free to check that out. But what would you guys see as we're talking about how to advance and really move forward and improving your maturing data science practices? What do you see as some of the future around data science?
Yeah. So what I see is that since it's an evolving field, and we have seen gaining maturity over the last 3 to 5 years, right? And what's happening is that since the focus is coming more on data and data science, the construct and how the team positioning is within an organization also is evolving. So I see, for example, when say maturity, right? So maturity is also a function of, as you earlier brought the point, that focus of the organization, right? Whether it's a CIO-driven organization or just a manager-driven, and even if it is a manager-driven, what I see is that since data and analytics are going to become such important asset for every organization, so they will start kind of moving from mission-oriented teams to embedded teams to then kind of completely having data science team within each of the key functions of the organization, right? So that kind of evolution I expect, and that will bring some kind of super expertise as well. For example, if you are pretty large, let us say you have a data science team of 20 for even your marketing team, right? So then your data scientist will be more mature, more thorough, senior, and they will become slowly a kind of super expert in that field. So that kind of that's one way I see future is coming, the era of super expertise in data science. Science.
Okay. So the vision of data science and data scientists really being an asset. They're not a cost center as much as an asset, and mission-oriented teams, and completely within functional units. That's some of the future. Dennis or Vamsi? Vamsi, it looks like you had some comments.
Yeah, to add on to what Prasoon mentioned, I think we are past the hype cycle. I think any new field or technology goes through those cycles, and I believe we are passed through that hype cycle where people maybe over invested in these and realize that they're not going to provide as much value. I think more people are aware of what the possibilities are with data science, and so I think the investments will be more focused moving forward and tied directly to what ROI they can provide.
Excellent. Dennis, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I guess
before we move on?
as far as going forward, I've been doing a lot of research on this chat GPT, and it's just from an analytical standpoint, we're looking at it. Can it help teach programming or do programming for us? Microsoft's already looking about integrating into Word and email for you, so it can do your emails for you. Read an article yesterday about writing research abstracts. So how's that going to impact us? We're already trying to automate the data engineering side of it already. Can that help that? And I just find it exciting what's going on. It's scary from an academic standpoint as far as students using it for papers. But from an automation standpoint, I think it has a real value, and I'm trying to learn more about it. I mean, it's only been out for a month and a half, so.
Yeah, but I do think that it could have the potential to really shape the industry. And maybe we're seeing more human-centered types of programs, things that are focused on how we think, and like neural nets are about how the brain functions. Maybe we're seeing more that are able to interact with what we do. So thank you for that. Last question, and this is kind of a lightning round, so like 40 seconds each. What final piece of advice would you give to someone trying to strengthen their maturing data science practice? Dennis, do you want to go first?
Sure. Stay current. Keep reading, keep learning more, go to conferences, interact with people in webinars, stay current what's going on. If not, you're going to lose it.
Excellent. Don't be a dinosaur. Prasoon?
Yeah, my suggestion would be that to your data science team exposed to business, let them kind of interact with your top leaders, and that would be the best way to motivate and retain them.
Excellent. The interactions, and especially with some of the top peers. Vamsi?
When you're building a team, if you find like 70 to 80% of what you need in a person, just hire them and teach the rest. Don't look for the unicorns. And also be flexible in general with their professional development needs once the practice is maturing. And
That's
also
excellent. I love that.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Also understand that there's a research element to any data science project, so be flexible with the deadlines. So don't treat it as like any regular IT project. Right.
Okay. Yeah. So build a team of unicorn. The team is the unicorn, so to speak, is able to do everything. Don't expect every member of every team to be able to do everything. That's great advice. And the research side is excellent advice as well, that this is not an IT project. That's why sometimes data science functions don't do well when they're under IT. But there's a research part. I make my teams go to Google Scholar and do research on the topic before they even decide what data they want to pull. So that's also great advice. This has been a really informative session. I hope you guys that are listening will check us out on LinkedIn. And thank you so much for allowing us to talk about advancing your maturing data science practice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. Did a great
Michael?
job running us through it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Beverly, and panelists Dennis, Prasoon, and Vamsi for such an insightful discussion. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today. Now, this session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Beverly and panelists, thank you so much.